spreads very fast. That becomes the norm or the normative behavior of people. That becomes a normal thing for people to do. And therefore, you will not have a good society.
When we normalize a certain behavior, it becomes part of our culture. And I think what has happened over time is that we have taken away the feeling of something being wrong, which then ends up being called corruption, and it has become normal. So if someone grabs a piece of land, it becomes normal. And after some time, people develop a tolerance for that kind of behavior. Then it becomes part of our culture. Now, when people lose that conscience, when people lose that sense that this thing is wrong, when the individual loses that sense that what I'm doing is wrong, when the society around him or her loses that sense that this is wrong, then you have an embedded culture.
But right now, corrupt persons are being embraced by the communities and lionized as important pillars of communities, and that is wrong.
Sijaiona hatua serikali wamechukua, sijaiona.
Uhuru alifanya kazi mzuri kama president yetu. Let him follow those people na hii watu wakuwa prosecuted na wekwe ndani. Bila kuweka hii watu ndani ndio tupate wakuwa ufishaji pate kufanya nini? Ipungue.
So kwangu mimi nashukuru rais, our president Kenyatta ameng'ang'ana sana hata akachukua hawa wenye manguruwe wenye walikuwa na katika hizo zones za corruption zone. So kwangu mimi serikali inang'ang'ana.
The fight against corruption by the government currently is commendable. What the president did, the suspension of certain high-ranking individuals, is something that has rarely happened in Kenya. However, we will never be able to say it is enough because it's an ongoing fight.
In terms of policy, I want to say that we have lagged behind because up to now we don't have an anti-corruption policy. The process has been on course, but it is taking too long.
When we do our workshops, training workshops and seminars for members, we from time to time do invite resource persons who come and talk to members and bring in issues of anti-corruption tendencies. What is expected of a leader. That happens, but it's not on a regular basis, but from time to time.
And as if in recognition of this fact, this police officer accused of demanding bribes from members of the public at the Larry roadblock on the Nairobi-Nakuru highway attempted to make a getaway when Kenya Anti-Corruption Commission officers arrived.
Anybody who is caught engaged in any form of corruption, whether a traffic officer, whether a crime officer, we deal with that officer at two levels. First, we deal with him or her disciplinarily. And my instructions are, you get caught in corruption, we'll have you fired. You no longer be a police man or a woman. Number two, you face the law.
There's willingness to start doing something about it, putting the right laws, whether it's Anti-Bribery Act, shaming people. A list of shame is a major step, because even when you walk in the streets, people look at you differently. They think you are actually shamed. Whether you're guilty or not, you are actually shamed. 175 names out of 40 million Kenyans, they were just not picked from the blues. So for me, I'm not saying they're all guilty. It's an example of where we need to begin.
On naming and shaming those senior public officers, senior state officers that have been involved in corruption is the best strategy. Whether they have been found guilty, whether they will be found guilty, doesn't matter. What is important is that for the public to see and to know the public officers, the state officers are no longer shielded. It doesn't matter who you are, you'll be named and you'll be taken to court.
You will recall that His Excellency the President spoke about the need to revisit the entire legal, institutional, administrative, and policy mechanisms for fighting corruption. We are at a very, very advanced stage of concluding that assignment, and we shall be proposing very radical changes to the law about how the Anti-Corruption Commission is organized. We will be making serious changes to that. We will be making serious changes and proposals for changes as to how prosecution cases are handled, by who, where, how, in what manner. We will also be making very radical changes about how the judiciary should deal with anti-corruption courts, how they should be organized, how they should be manned, the duration they should hear cases, and so on. And above all else, and a very key area, we want to reconsider the regime of forfeiture of property after conviction.
Well, I would say the government has done a lot, but in terms of building the institutions. Now, what we need to do is now look at, we have institutions, but who are running those institutions? As much as you will say you have an institution that is dealing with corruption, and not just the anti-corruption institution, but many other institutions. Parliament is an institution that has to deal with corruption, and all the government agencies are institutions that have to deal with corruption. We've come up with policies, with good governance policies, but I think we are not getting in touch in reality, that until we deal with our attitudes and character, and also until we deal with what the mindset is all about, then we will be having very good institutions, but we will not achieve what we want to achieve in fighting corruption.
We need to change our strategy in fighting corruption. We cannot deal with corruption by setting up institutions. What we need to do is to engage the public. So we need sort of resocializations. We need to go back to the schools. We need to go back to the families. We need to engage people at their spaces.
We have spent a lot of money and time and effort and laws in investigating, prosecuting corruption. We've not spent the same amount of time and effort in prevention of corruption, which is more important, in my view, because investigating and prosecuting corruption is a very difficult task. I mean, by virtue of the fact that corruption is especially to do with money, they have money to use to protect themselves over and beyond committing the act. So what's important, we should focus on as a society going forward, is to prevent it.
In charge of the tender anakwambia sijakataa. Watu wapo hapa wengi wenye wanataka nini? Hii kazi. Nenda uniletee 250,000 ndio nifanye nini? Niende kwa procurement nipatie kwa procurement hizi stakabadhi zako, wewe ukikuja na kupatia the whole what? Dokumenti zote zile uende ujaze na kampani zingine ambazo hazijakuwepo.
As the chairman of the National Anti-Corruption Campaign Steering Committee, together with its members, we have decided to partner with the religious groups and other people in this country who can help us drive a value-based campaign.
The committee is set up to undertake public education, sensitization and awareness creation. This is an approach that was deliberately conceived because other approaches literally talk about enforcement of the law. That is investigations, prosecutions, asset tracing, and so on and so on. But there was a realization that you cannot eliminate corruption just by applying the law. Because, of course, when you are applying the law, it presupposes that then the other institutions are also working in the same direction. The law is serving the purpose. For the campaign, we focus on the public because they have a role to play. Each individual has a role to play.
The way forward today is now to involve all the people on the grassroots, the counties and the people after, at the sides of the counties. These are the people that we have to involve to show them the goodness of a society that is corruption-free. And just like if you are boiling water, you don't boil water from the top. You put fire at the bottom, and when it boils up, the whole top will be affected.
We have established grassroots-based structures that undertake campaign, and these ones we are calling them county anti-corruption civilian oversight committees. These are we have set them up together with the county governments. Their work actually is to undertake the education and sensitization, address local corruption issues. The third one is to provide some support mechanism to the members of the public, so that if there are corruption issues taking place, the members of the public can quickly run to the members of the civilian oversight committees who are drawn from their villages. They live with them there.
As a person, I hold the value of integrity. By this I mean I look at myself. How do I work? How do people see me? How do I handle issues? Is it for the benefits?
Tumezoea kuhongwa. Na sasa huu umekuwa ni msimamo wetu. Utanifanya nini nikienda nikihonga? Mambo yangu yamekuwa mazuri. Yaani huyo ni mwenye pesa. Sasa hayo ni maadili ya pesa, maana una pesa, hayo ndio maadili yako.
Kenya ina mambo na values wingi huwa zimevunjwa.
Values are the very heart of any society. In societies where people respect honesty, those societies grow. As I've said at a different forum, we live in a country where virtue is vice and vice is virtue, where we demonize our saints and we canonize our thieves.
Values are not something that you can read in a book. Values are the in you, and therefore it depends on now how you've grown up, because we always say values start within the Bible, the ways of life.
Values are the things that we hold dear, and that's why they are called values. They're the things that, for example, if you value human life, that means you hold the human life yourself and that of somebody else dear.
I think a value is what is shared as a commitment for the organization of society to achieve the maximum benefit for the maximum number of people. If we're committed to justice, justice is a value.
Truth is an important value. Honesty is an important value. And compassion, for example, is an important value.
We have got family values. We have got institutional, organizational values, religious values, personal values. Right now we are talking about national values.
Our values are enshrined in the national anthem. If you think of the national anthem, the three stanzas, that's where the values of Kenyans are. We will protect this country, we will work hard. You know, when we talk about security begins with me, it's in that national anthem. Tutalinda nchi yetu.
Kenyans have got two sets of values. They are the values that are written in the law, the values that are written in the 6th chapter of the Constitution of Kenya, for example, and the values that are particularly captured in Article 10 of the Constitution about things like good governance, about things like a proper comportment, that you are honest, that you take yourself and your society in a manner that upholds higher ethical and moral values. Those are the laws or values that are written in our laws as Kenyans.
But as a country, Chapter 10 of the Constitution give us a very good launchpad where we can internalize how we behave in that public space that we have been privileged actually to work in. And it's a question of ensuring that there is robust investigation whenever there is breaches, to those values, and also that there are sanctions, and there must be strong sanctions, because deterrent is very key when you're dealing with issues of values.
But there are values that define where is Kenya going. We want to create a strong, democratic, constitutional, rule of law based modern republic. How do we do that? By institutionalizing justice, fairness, impartiality, transparency, respect for others, accountability, etc., etc., etc.
In the context of the new constitutional dispensation, we have a whole Article 10 that has 17 values. But it's not a listing of values that changes people. It must be in the hearts and minds of men. It is the minds and hearts of men that must change.
So it's my appeal that the Kenyan public remains vigilant, first at the individual level, internalize these concepts. In the book of Prophet Jeremiah, it's written that, we are hoping at a time when these things are no longer just written in books, but they're written in the hearts of men.
Once the constitution was promulgated, and we realize now that the national values are already anchored in the constitution, the next thing was now to legislate. But before you legislate, you first come up with a policy. So we embarked on developing a policy on national values and the principles of governance. We completed that in 2012. The policy is now a sessional paper number 8 of 2013.
So you are to reduce all these values into workable charters, public service charters. That's one way of entrenching them and giving life to them. Then also reducing them into codes of conduct for leadership.
We want something called integrity, something called honesty. And in the syllabus today we have in the Kiganjo, as they go through Kiganjo and all the training institutions like Embakasi, Administration Police Training College, GSU, and the CID, we bring all these values as part of the syllabus.
We are endeavoring to combat corruption is to inculcate positive values in ourselves within the National Police Service, right from our training institutions, to emphasize the importance of patriotism, the importance of fidelity to the law, the importance of exercising equity and justice for all, the importance of treating Kenyans and even foreigners amongst us with fairness, because we are still at the transitional phase, moving from the era of police force into a service.
I think that we do need legal and administrative frameworks that now mainstream these values. For example, those of us in public office, we are subject to the public officers' ethics laws.